Hey guys, so I did a video recently where I asked people to ask me questions, anything they wanted to know, and this audio recording will be the first part of me answering those questions. So I'm not going to answer all of them in this one. I will do a part 2, maybe a part 3 if I get more questions. But I have quite a few questions already so far, thank you. So I will answer some of them here. Now, I do actually realize that I made a video a while ago, a few months ago, where I also asked people, what would you like to see on this channel? And I was going to do videos, like whole videos, based on some of those requests, but I realized I haven't actually done them. I suppose I wasn't finding enough inspiration, or I wasn't, I don't want to give like information that I don't think is maybe very accurate, or not that it's all about accuracy, but especially with astrology, it's not all about just accuracy, but I didn't find it in myself to answer those questions in whole videos, but I will actually try to revisit the comments on that video. It's called "What Would You Like to See on This Channel?" And I will revisit those comments, and I'll see if I can make videos for at least some of those requests, because I did ask, so it would be nice to kind of answer some of those questions. But I will try to answer some questions that I got today on the Q&A video that I did recently. So anyway, that out of the way, let's just go into it. So I will be mentioning the usernames. I presume that's okay. So Manic Mercurian asked quite a few questions, and I'm gonna answer some of them now. So it's kind of I did think about what I was going to say, but a lot of it will be sort of like a riff, like improvised as well, because I did think about them, but there's probably other thoughts that will come to me as I'm talking and thinking about these things. So they're all astrological questions. So he asked, what is your favorite or least favorite placement in your chart, or just in general? So I did think about my chart, and one aspect that I like, that I really have, that I really like that I have, is, and I actually like seeing it in other people. I think it's kind of like almost like a good luck charm in a way. So even if the rest of the chart is quite challenging, or there's clearly challenges that the person is dealing with that relate to some of the aspects in their chart, this aspect seems to kind of at least give some kind of little good luck charm. Of course, it can mean other things, but I just kind of look at it as like a good luck charm sometimes. And that is Sun trine Jupiter. I think it makes for a personality that is always interested in learning, and has like an expansive mindset and a really open mind. Generally, there's an aspect to the character that it does have a cheerful aspect to their character. No pun intended. Well, maybe it is intended. Aspect. So like, I consider myself to have a fairly complex, even maybe difficult chart, but just having Sun trine Jupiter, I think it kind of makes it so that I feel like that I look at that aspect as like a good luck charm. It does give me an element of like, I never lose hope fully. Like, even when I'm really down in the dumps, there's always a side of me that is always looking forward, or is looking ahead, and is having hope that things will work out, which I kind of associate with Jupiter and this aspect in particular. So even when I'm really down in the dumps or something, like, there's always a side of me that, like, I never go all the way down. There's always a side of me that remains hopeful, at least, that things will work out. And I really like seeing this aspect in other people's chart as well, even though it can also make for a slightly excessive kind of personality. Like, there's a side of the person that there's a fun side to this aspect, but obviously you can get carried away, maybe not as much as with the square, but there is a side to the personality that is like you know, kind of they can be kind of a wild child in some ways that, can be really fun, especially with the trine. But, the person can get carried away on kind of, there's a lot of energy, and, that can obviously be positive or negative. There's a lot of things that I could bring into this question. There's a lot of ways that I could answer it, but I do want to mention another aspect where when Mercury and Uranus are aspecting, especially in a trine, maybe a sextile as well, I think that's really cool because it shows a kind of an open mind, and really the person has the ability to see unique possibilities and unique solutions to things. And I think that's really a cool aspect, and the person is very intuitive and kind of getting intuitive information very easily in very kind of offbeat, quirky ways. So maybe they can always come up with unique solutions to things, or they have unique ideas, or when you ask them a question, they can give a very kind of intuitively, they can give a very unexpected kind of answer that you weren't expecting, but they don't even know where it came from, and you don't know where it comes from, but it just comes, and it's like this intuition that's really unexpected and just can show that the person really thinks about things in a unique way. And I think that's a really cool aspect to have. There's more that I could say, but I do think those two are really cool. So this recording will probably be quite long, and this is only the first part, but I don't want to make it too long, so I'll probably just move on and talk about the least favorite placements. So, and by the way, I have Sun trine Jupiter, which I talked about, but I don't have a Mercury Uranus aspect, even though they are in signs that are squaring each other. My Mercury is in Aries and my Uranus is in Capricorn, but they're, the orb is too wide for something that I would consider an aspect. They're a bit too wide for me to really consider it an aspect. But so I have the Sun trine Jupiter, and so that's something that is in my chart. And Mercury trine Uranus, or Mercury sextile Uranus, is just something that I see in other people's charts that I find really cool, and just in general I find it really cool. Now, least favorite placements, well, if you ask me about in your chart or just in general, and when I think of my chart, I immediately always think of two aspects that I think have caused me the most difficulty, and those are Moon square Saturn and Sun square Neptune. So, but that's just a personal thing, like it's something personal that I'm working through in this life. I look at it as sort of like part of my soul evolution, or my soul growth, if you want to use those terms. So Moon square Saturn is very emotionally heavy, and can have trouble with just emotions, and there's always like karma attached to feeling good or feeling positive. The person can have a hard time with just having kind of letting go and just having fun. There's an element of that, even if you have other aspects, like I have the Sun trine Jupiter, which is a lot more fun. But with the Moon square Saturn, it's like the emotions are always attached to karma, and it's like it takes a lot of work to feel a certain way and to feel really positive. I think Moon square Saturn is just really kind of like, it's a hard worker, but it's also, there's a heaviness attached to that. If you think of it, like the Saturnian element of it is very heavy. So they don't always allow themselves to just have fun or to just not think. There's always an inner heaviness, even if you're having fun. Like it's always in the background, kind of, because all these aspects, they're working together. So even if you're having fun, you still have the Moon square Saturn at the same time. So it's like there's always a side of you that is more heavy and more serious, maybe. And Sun square Neptune in my chart represents kind of I would say Moon square Saturn and Sun square Neptune, they both have an element of like insecurity. So Moon square Saturn can have an insecurity. And I could say more about that, but maybe I can make a whole video on that. I was actually planning to make a video on Moon Saturn aspects at some point. And so Sun square Neptune is an aspect that has an element of like identity crisis, and just like you're not sure like who you are, and it makes for a really difficult like karmic pattern to work through in life. If you don't even like really understand who you are, you don't have a strong sense of self. Sun square Neptune, people can be easily misled or easily they can become very easily fascinated by things that people say, and so that it's very easy to kind of misguide them or mislead them because they don't have such a strong sense of self. They have like a fluid sense of self. Like I would consider myself to have a very fluid sense of self. I don't have this feeling of like I know exactly who I am and there's like a specific person like quote unquote inside me. Like I don't feel that there's like a specific person that is talking and is doing things. Like I know my likes and my dislikes and things like that, but it doesn't feel like there's a wholeness. I don't feel like there's a specific person in me, kind of, if that makes any sense. Maybe it's hard to understand if you don't have a Sun Neptune aspect, but I think with the Sun squaring Neptune, it is very much like that. There is an element of like fluidity and just like it's hard to pin down yourself, and other people may find you hard to pin down as well, which is something that I've been told as well, that like it's like you're hard to pin down. It's it's like you change from day to day, or it's like there's there's a compassionate element to Sun Neptune as well, but it can mean that the person can also just be easily misled, like I said, and just because they don't have such a strong sense of self, so they can easily be affected and influenced. So there's a sensitivity, a really harsh kind of sensitivity attached to this as well. The person can be really sensitive, really oversensitive. But I mean, it's not just a negative aspect. There is a beauty always attached to Sun Neptune as well, with the compassionate element. But with the square, it's just more something to work through, that you don't get overly sensitive, that you don't lose yourself in other people, that you don't lose yourself in activities too much, or that you don't start neglecting yourself. That you might get so involved in an activity that you start neglecting like other things that you need to do or things that you need to take care of. So I think that's a really difficult aspect. So those are two that are in my chart. I would also say, it kind of is, I don't want to say concerning, but it's definitely significant when I see someone that has Sun square Saturn. I have the sextile between Sun and Saturn. But I do feel the Sun Saturn thing in me to a certain degree because I have the sextile. So even though sextile is considered like a so-called soft aspect, I still feel the Sun Saturn, the difficult side of Sun Saturn in some ways as well. But when I see someone that has the square, I think they really have this. So Sun square Saturn people, it's like there's a lot of hardship. They're trying to achieve, but there's a lot of obstacles in their path, and they're always trying to like maybe get somewhere, or they're trying to achieve something and become something, and there's just obstacles in the way, and these people can be very heavy as well. It's kind of like the moon square Saturn, so it is a similar kind of, it's a Saturn square, so it's a similar thing. So there's a heaviness attached to this as well, like the moon square Saturn. But moon and sun are different. Moon is maybe more in this moon square Saturn is maybe more emotionally difficult, and sun square Saturn is like maybe you stand in your own way, you make things difficult for yourself. The way you act puts obstacles in your path, or you just find that you go through life and there's a lot of obstacles, but it's just something for the person to work through. I mean, it's not like there's just good and bad aspects. It's something that we have the chart that we have, and we have to work through what we have. And I think I've probably known quite a few people that have Sun square Saturn, and there is kind of like a heaviness and like a difficulty attached to it. There's definitely more that I could say, but I do want to move on. Oh, actually, the second question is very similar. So, what are some of the hardest or maybe easiest placements in your opinion? So, I think I actually covered it more like this. So, I suppose the way I answered the first question is pretty much the same as the second question. So, I'm gonna move on. So, I really had to think about this next one. So, and I had to do some research. So, it's about the quincunx or the inconjunct. It's kind of annoying that they have two names. I haven't decided if I want to call it more the quincunx or the inconjunct. I suppose the quincunx makes it sound more unique because inconjunct sounds like conjunction. So, what is the best way to approach a quincunx in one's natal chart? And he did say, if you need specifics, then particularly Sun, Virgo, quincunx, Aries, Lilith. So I don't know if I can give an actual interpretation of the Aries, Virgo, quincunx with Sun and Lilith, but I did read up on the quincunx quite a lot today, and I actually took some notes. So, the quincunx is an aspect that it's there's a lot of incongruence, if that makes sense. So the planets involved in a quincunx kind of have nothing to do with each other. It's like they have nothing in common. They don't have the same modality. They don't have the same element or anything like that. So, but they have to exist in the same person. They have to exist together. So there's like an unease. It's like I took this note that it's like two completely different people trying to talk to each other awkwardly at a party. So there is a sense of like awkwardness and unease with this aspect, but I think with this you have to kind of accept the contradiction. It is a very contradictory aspect. You have to learn to juggle both, because with the inconjunct or the quincunx, same thing. If you try to satisfy one planet, you're inevitably gonna dissatisfy the other planet. So I think the obvious way to juggle that would be, and I saw this in articles today as well, people talking about this, so that the way to juggle this is look at it with an open mind, creativity and humor. So all these contradictions exist in us, especially if we have inconjuncts or a lot of inconjuncts. So part of life is this absurdity, that all these things exist, and a lot of it just doesn't seem to go together, but it still has to exist. So there's a lot of absurdity in life. There's just a tremendous amount of absurdity, and I think people with a lot of quincunxes see this absurdity, like they recognize this absurdity. And especially if you're working on your quincunx, if you're working on those quincunx aspects, then one way to do that really is to try and really recognize the absurdity and just accept it. See it with a really open mind, see it with creativity, work at it with creativity, and see it with humor. So an interesting note that I want to make is that I actually thought of this myself as well, and then I actually saw confirmation about my insight in an article. So I had the idea that it seems like comedians might have a lot of quincunxes, because it does have to do with humor. And I did see an article and it said that like comedians often have many quincunxes, and it makes sense because quincunx makes for someone who is able to see the awkward incongruencies of life, and the comedians are actually using it in their vocation. So, comedians often point out the absurdity of life. This exists, but also this exists. How does that go together? Like, that doesn't make sense, but it still exists. So comedians have the job of pointing out these absurdities, and the quincunx deals with the absurdity of life in a way. And sometimes there's nothing you can do about it except laugh at it or laugh about it or make it creative, like make jokes about it or, write about it. I would say writers might have a lot of quincunxes as well. People who observe life and see the absurdities and see the incongruencies and see the contradictions. Sometimes there's nothing you can do about this. I remember a quote from a TV show. I can't remember what TV show it was, but I remember it when I saw it when I was like a kid or a teenager. and I always remembered it. It said, you can't control life. Life wants to be a mess. And sometimes that applies. I'm not saying that you never have any free will. You do, but some things are out of your control. And sometimes it's better to accept these things and see the humor in it. So sometimes we have things inside us that are so contradictory, or so sort of, it's like two people awkwardly trying to talk to each other when they have nothing in common, but they still kind of have to talk, and they still have to be civil. So maybe these parts of yourself that are in a quincunx, you need to see them as like, okay, both exist in me, and they have to exist in me together, but they just don't have that much in common. They're not going to have a very easy conversation, but they still have to exist. So I don't know, I can't honestly tell you how to navigate this particular Aries Virgo quincunx. But I think what I talked about, just about the quincunx in general, it might actually help with that. So it's just about accepting these incongruencies and like use your creativity and your open mind and your humor to work your way through it, I think, if that makes any sense. I just think that's interesting that comedians have a lot of quincunxes. I think that makes perfect sense, actually. I have one quincunx in my chart, so I have Jupiter quincunx, the midheaven, MC. And the way that I look at that is that, I can have a lot of hope with just Jupiter when it comes to like what I want to do in life and things like that. Or I can kind of just do things without having a clear vision. So it's like Jupiter doesn't exactly mesh with my MC. Like if I had Jupiter conjunct the MC, that might mean that I have a lot of luck, for example, in my like work life, or just my professional life. With Jupiter being in such a strange relationship with the MC, like a quincunx, it's more that like I can't get my hopefulness and my good luck to work when it comes to like my work life and things that I do for the world, like in the world, if that makes sense. So it's hard to explain, but it's kind of like, it's hard to get that hopefulness to apply when it comes to my professional life or my work life, or just things that I do outside of just the house and things like that. So sometimes I will have a lot of hopefulness about that, but it's like it's not consistent. It's like it's not easy for me to be hopeful and have like these grand ideas, which is very Jupiter, when it comes to the MC themes. I don't find it easy to incorporate this high vision of like, oh, I'm going to do this and this and this when it comes to my work life and things like that. It's not easy for me to incorporate or like to mesh those two areas. And I'm going to answer just one more question in this part, and I will do part 2 later on. So I want to answer Manic Mercurian's question about what is your take on Scorpio? Anything original or unique that you've observed especially? So thank you. That's a very interesting question as well. So there's a lot that I could say about Scorpio. There's a lot that can be said about any sign. But one thing I just want to make a note on this thing about Scorpio that I've often think about, that I've noticed, is that Scorpio actually, like, it's quite feisty and really good at self-preserving, if that makes sense. So I knew a Scorpio before who just seemed very, like, she was able to navigate her way through situations. She was very smart, really strong inner reserves, just really able to look after herself and like able to get on with it and able to get by whatever was thrown in her way in this situation in situations. So just really able to kind of check in with, I think Scorpio is probably, I'm talking about Sun and Scorpio people mostly. This person had Sun in Scorpio. I think Sun and Scorpio people are able to really tap into themselves, and like they know like how to they know what they are, they know what they want, kind of, and it's like they're able to navigate situations based on that. So they know what their abilities are, and they're quite, they can, this doesn't apply to every Sun in Scorpio, but it's just, I've noticed this in Sun in Scorpio people, and I am using this one person as an example. Like, she was always very feisty, and she was able to just, it's like you could leave her, kind of alone on some random place, if that makes sense, and she was able to like know what to do. She has the inner reserves, and she's able to check in with herself and like know what to do. Like, she has that inner strength and those inner reserves about like she's gonna look after herself, and she's very like smart and quick, and kind of, people with Sun in Scorpio, they're sharp and they're incisive, and so they're able to kind of handle what comes in their way, just even practically, with practical tasks, even like, just they're able to know what to do to kind of survive. Like, they have that survival instinct in a very strong way. So I'm going to leave it at that. So this is the first part of the Q&A, and I will do a second part at some point soon. So I actually only answered one person's questions in this part, so sorry about that, but I will get to the other questions later. So thank you.